January of this year, Jake Paul partnered with the PFL, which was a surprising move to basically everybody. But what exactly is in it for the PFL? The PFL is a constantly growing company. Since their first show 5 years ago, they've increased their viewership by about 45% year on year, according to themselves, that is. So that begs the question, why would they tie themselves to Jake Paul of all people? But the answer is obvious when you think about it for 2 seconds. He's a social media powerhouse. On YouTube alone he has 20 million subscribers, and on Instagram he has 25 million followers. He has a loyal fan base that watches pretty much everything he does, from his YouTube videos to his boxing matches. He's popular whether you like it or not. So when the PFL is looking to get any advantage it can over their competition and boost their viewership at the same time, partnering with Jake Paul makes complete sense, especially when he's drawn millions of his loyal viewers to watch the sport of boxing. As much as I dislike creator boxing and him, I can't deny that it hasn't been successful and that he's not successful either. He's promoted himself into a position where many consider him a good boxer, and he's certainly someone that many people would happily watch to either see him win or lose. He may actually be one of the most popular boxers in the world right now, purely based off of social media stats. So when he does eventually fight inside that PFL cage, he's going to draw in a lot of new eyes to the sport of MMA, and he's definitely going to draw in more eyes specifically to the PFL. And that's exactly what the PFL needs and wants. They're more than likely going to build a card around him as the main event, and if they have any sense, they will put their best guys on that card and make high level entertaining fights to get those people that are there to watch Jake Paul far more interested in the sport and the PFL itself, because if their first exposure to MMA is a banger PFL card, they're going to be far more likely to come back and watch other PFL events. And if that card is successful for the PFL, which, let's face it, it probably will be, it's probably going to be the biggest card they'll do up to that point. Who's to say they won't do more creator fights? I'd prefer them not to, because most of them aren't pros, but there you go. But I wouldn't say it's unlikely that they're going to drop a winning formula. And who am I to say they shouldn't fight anyway? It's completely up to them despite all the risks. If it leads to more growth for the sport of MMA, and hopefully it'll be more positive than negative, and if it creates more genuine competition for the UFC, then I'm all for it. Especially if this supposed super fight division that Jake is a co-creator of, which is supposed to have a 50-50 split of revenue between fighters and the company, if that's a real thing, fighters getting paid more is a great thing. Especially MMA fighters, who in comparison to every other sport, get a pittance anyway. Jake can probably have a good impact on the sport of MMA, at least in the way that he advocates for fighter pay and putting more fresh new eyes on the sport. But will he be successful in the sport? Yeah, probably. They'll either give him a well past it known name for his debut, or some guy who's willing to step into the cage knowing they're most likely going to get the shit kicked out of them and lose, but they'll get a decent payday at the end of the night. Though I don't know how that kind of matchmaking is going to go for Jake at this point. He's done the whole fight someone that's terrible or past it thing for most of his boxing career, so maybe people will be sick of that by the time he fights in a cage, but I wouldn't count on it. The only way I see him fighting someone legit in MMA is if they aren't willing to have him fight a nobody for his debut, and if he doesn't fight a nobody, he's going to stand a much higher chance of losing. Nate Diaz may be past it, but he's still a far better grappler than Jake will ever be, and he seems to be the main candidate for the PFL debut. He's been offered some big bucks by the chairman, 15 million as a standing offer, and that's far more than he's ever made in the UFC, which is just sad by the way considering just how popular he was and the type of guys that he fought at the end of his career. But Nate doesn't seem too open to considering that offer whatsoever, which is fair enough. But he has been offered over double the highest pay he's ever had in the UFC to fight Jake fucking Paul. That says far more about how the UFC's run than it does about the PFL and Jake Paul. But anyway, that's my thoughts on Jake Paul and the PFL. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to subscribe.